I talk about the 3Cs. Critical thinking starts. This was given to me in the year 2000 by a former boss called Mike Hutchins.
Is critical thinking a muscle memory, a skill that can be learned?
I wasn't born with a strategic thinking brain or a critical thinking brain. It's a learned skill. I'm 6 years of age. I can't think like an 18-year-old.
Do you think leaders generally are on the front foot or behind where they need to be generally with their critical thinking skills?
Most of the leaders I speak to are busy on autopilot. Ask everybody in your business, can you give me one idea a month?
Hi, welcome to episode 11 of The Life of a Business Leader, Beyond Gut Feel, How Critical Thinking Shapes Great Leaders. I am absolutely delighted to be joined by Chris Brindley today, who's back by popular demand. Chris and I did one of the earlier episodes and people said to me, Royston, can you do more with Chris? His stuff is just so practical and he really chimes and resonates. So by popular demand, he is back. Thanks for joining us again, Chris.
Great to be back. Happy New Year. We're recording this in January, so lots going on. Where everyone started with hit the ground running. So great to be back. Thanks for the invite.
Chris, without wanting to put you up there on a pedestal, you know my thoughts in terms of you are one of the most relevant, practical being the key word, forward-thinking leaders and coaches that's out there today. Strong, purposeful leadership is more important than ever. So who better to talk about a critical skill that all leaders need to achieve mastery over? So you know my passion for the life of a business leader is just to hit the ground running, start adding value. So here's my opening question I think will just help frame this whole important subject for our listener today. What does critical thinking mean to you in the context of great leadership?
It means everything, Royston, because everything we do starts with thinking. So I've got a post on my wall, so I'll share it with everybody as part of the start. It says, "Watch your thoughts, for they become your words. Watch your words, for they become your actions. Watch your actions, for they become your habits. Watch your habits, for that becomes your character. Watch your character, because that becomes your destiny." So it all starts with thinking. And in this busy world, and we talk about VUCA, don't we? We talk about the world being volatile, uncertain, complex, and full of ambiguity. It takes critical thinking to navigate that. We're in uncharted territory. We've got this perma crisis that you and I speak about a lot. And how do you navigate all that? It's critical thinking. So take the time to give it the importance it deserves in your diary.
Chris, you used a key word there about time. And one of my challenges that I wanted to talk about today is, what stops leaders from really developing that critical skill? And is time a factor? Because we are in a world that's more relentless and fast-paced than ever. So isn't one of the key factors that enables critical thinking to be really effective, that you've got to create the time in order to do it?
Yeah, look, you and I have both got exactly the same 24 hours today. So is everybody watching this podcast. So I can't change time. It will move on whether I like it or not. So it's nothing to do with time. It's everything to do with choice. So for me, if you want to be known as a critical thinker, if you want to be a better leader, the one appointment I would look for in your diary every single week that should never be cancelled is that appointment with yourself where you start the journey of critical thinking. But time is only one thing, and that appointment is only one thing. Critical thinking isn't just sat on your own in a dark room hoping that the ideas will come to you. Critical thinking might be around questions like, who's already done what I'm looking to do? And you might actually send them a LinkedIn invite, asking if you can meet them for 30 minutes to ask them some critical questions. Questions like, what were the enablers that enabled you to achieve what I'm looking to do? What were the barriers that you came across in preventing you from achieving what you wanted? How did you overcome those barriers? So as well as time, for me, it's having great people around you, trusted advisors either inside your team or outside of your team. But it starts with critical thinking, thinking about who can help me achieve what I want to achieve.
You hit on something really important there, Chris, that I talk about in Rise, which is my second book, and it was around the whole concept of success modeling. And, you don't need to reinvent the wheel. Part of critical thinking is not having to do all your thinking yourself, but who has trodden a pathway that you've already been down that you can learn from. You can learn from what works for them, what didn't work for them. So that's what you're alluding to there in terms of that whole concept of success modeling, which is part of critical thinking is, why reinvent the wheel when there's people who've already been there?
And for me, that's it. So, if you go back into the whole thinking bit, Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're absolutely right. And therefore, I always find that engaging with others is a real stimulus for me because I'm curious by nature. I tend not to make statements. I tend to ask questions. And by asking those questions, ultimately, my brain starts to work better. And actually, just like you and I do often, we feed off each other. That's because we're asking each other questions. We're doing high support and high challenge. All of that really makes the brain work better. And I'm a huge fan of the book, The Chimp Paradox by Dr. Steve Peters, because he really talks about how the brain works and how you can get the maximum benefit from your brain. And I know you talk about the neck-top computer a lot. And for me, your brain's the best thing you carry around with you.
Yeah, you spot it. I did a mindset mastery at the start of this year for all our clients, and that's exactly one of the things I talked about, that you've got your laptops, we've got data centers, we've got AI, but one of the most powerful computers that's ever been invented, we carry around with us every single day. It weighs in about 3 pounds. It's our neck top computer. And, for me today, this conversation plays right into that. Are you really harnessing the power of one of the most powerful computers that was given to you at birth? And I think part of the challenge, Chris, is because it was given to us as free issue, do we truly use it and get the full value from it?
Look, I think there's lots of studies out there that shows we use only a small percentage of our brain. And that's because often we're on autopilot as leaders. Often we think we move from crisis to crisis, day in, day out. And we do say things like, I haven't got the time. Bullshit, right? You can choose to have critical thinking moments in your diary. That should be the most important appointment you have all week. The one with yourself, the one that looks into the future and says, what do I need to start doing now? What do I need to start communicating now? What actions do I need others to start taking now? And then get out there, work with your trusted advisors, work with that group of people you know are on your side. They're going to help you move that heavy flywheel if you're familiar with good to great. And actually, it starts with the critical thinking. Because when we're on autopilot, our brain doesn't operate in a creative way. I'm a big fan of a guy called Jack Black, and I don't mean the American actor. I want to like Jack Black, who founded a company called MindStore, really helped me with my, well, I call it mental architecture. How I structure my brain. So alongside the Steve Peters, Jack Black and MindStore, and Jack talks about if you're at full pelt, your brain doesn't work in terms of creativity because it operates in what's known as beta waves. When you get ideas when your right brain starts to work. And often, funnily enough, I bet there's people listening to this podcast who perhaps have just been lying on a sunbed on holiday and they've come up with a great idea, or that they're in light sleep and they come up with a great idea or a solution to a problem that they've been wrestling with. Or actually, even if you're getting a nice warm shower, all of that is your right brain starting to give you the answers. That's why critical thinking is really important, because your left brain is logical and analytical, not creative. So go relax and start that critical thinking journey.
You give me so many golden nuggets here, and our listeners, and I'm feverishly writing questions here that I want to fire back at you because this is brilliant stuff. Chris, you made a point there about when your brain's relaxed, whether you're on holiday or in light sleep, that's when the ideas come. Do you have a a pad and a pen by your bed, because if you don't capture those ideas in the middle of the night, the challenge is you wake up next morning and it's gone, isn't it?
Yeah, look again. Jack Black, who's got lots of cool stuff on YouTube, and I've been an advocate of Jack's for over 30 years now, and he calls it the night book. So he has the night book with the pad and the pencil by your bed, and literally, I woke up only a couple of days ago when I've got a really simple model that just came to me because I was in light sleep, and I call it the 3 Ps. Get great people, get great processes, and have great performance management. Funnily enough, if you do that, you'll be all right as a business. People, process, and performance management, which is, in sport, you'll be reviewing performance and getting some critical thinking about your next game or your next training session or your next season.
Yeah, so absolutely for our listeners, because I like to drive this to action, Chris. Make sure that you have by your bed. I don't take my mobile phone to bed. I don't want any technology near it, but Jack calls it the night book. I have my notebook and pen by the bed, and it drives Jane insane sometimes because in the middle of the night, she'll be waking up going, why have you got the little light on? What are you doing? And I'm there feverishly capturing notes with ideas, because you're right, that critical thinking when your brain's in that relaxed mode and it's got time to think, and when your golden gems come and you need to make sure that you capture them in that moment.
And again, I'll refer people back to Dr. Steve Peters and the Chin Paradox. Dr. Steve Peters talks about programming your computer. And actually, critical thinking is almost just creating new pathways in your mind for new solutions. Because Einstein said the definition of insanity is doing the same old thing and hoping for better results. Yeah. So you have to change your thinking to get different outcomes. So again, look at the chimp paradox and that computer. But if it's not programmed, your chimp operates, and your chimp isn't a thinker, right? It's a doer, and it does it on limited information. So it's reaction, not response. What critical thinking gives you is the ability to consider the best possible response. And there's a great formula called E plus R equals O. And E stands for the event. And often we've got no control over the event. The R stands for response. And our response is a chosen response, and we are 100% in control of the response. And the O is the outcome. So event plus response equals outcome. If you want a great outcome, have a great response, even though you can't control the event. And what's the response? Starts with critical thinking. Yeah. What do I want the outcome to be? Therefore, if I take that course of action now, will I get the outcome I want? No. In that case, choose a different response. And again, going back to just a few tips and techniques, if you want the best possible response, the chosen response, rather than the reaction, give yourself some time. So there's a model known as stimulus, space, response. You're not in control of the stimulus. Something's happened to you or happened to your business. Funnily enough, the longer the space, the better the response. As a result of that, chosen response equals great outcomes. That's the power of critical thinking, not reaction. Because when the reactions happen and it's not got a good outcome, you can't go back and change it. You just have to repair it. And often the damage is done. That's the power of critical thinking in the moment, never mind long-term planning.
Yeah, you sparked me with a couple of gold nuggets here. There's a quote I saw the other day which I think really plays into what we're talking about here. And the quote said this: the distance between where you are now and where you want to get to is not measured in miles, it's measured in mindset shifts.
Yeah.
And in your world, it's that the mindset shifts is your critical thinking. And when you show up at your critical junctures in life, how good are you at your choice points in terms of the decision making that you make? And that will either catapult you forward in hunting down your goals, or it will set you back, 10 steps on your journey, because it is all about your decision making at those critical junctures and choice points in life.
It's absolutely. And I meet people who make the decisions based on their opinion. I don't. I have an opinion, but it doesn't mean I'm right. What I like to do is go and ask lots of questions of other people. I like to be curious. That's critical thinking. Critical
Yeah.
thinking about looking at alternatives, not just deciding that the only answer you've ever had, been given, read on Google, is the right one. So I'm a great believer in questions, not statements. Often if somebody gives a statement, people then start to judge whether it's right or wrong in their mind. That doesn't help. Whereas asking questions stimulates the brain to absolutely go beyond its normal autopilot boundaries. And as a result of that, that's when you get real quality and diversity in your thinking by linking in with others. So look for alternative views, alternative solutions. So as well as your experience and your opinion, maybe go and find out if there's any evidence. Maybe go and find out if there's some experts in the field that you can use. So it's not all about, I keep saying this, just sitting in a dark room. Use the talent around you. Imagine the power of all the neck-top computers coming together to solve an issue. So, and you find that in your team. So leadership can be lonely, but it's only lonely if you choose to go alone. And it's that, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together, quote. So, get your team involved in some of this critical thinking. They might have real nuggets that can give you an even better solution to either a short, medium, or a long-term problem.
Yeah, love it. Chris, in your work that you do, the title for today's podcast was Beyond Gut Feel.
Yep.
How do you differentiate between if somebody says, my gut tells me this, or my intuition tells me this? Is there a difference between gut feel versus intuition? And if there is a difference, what is it?
Well, I think gut feel can often be, I've always done it this way, so I'm going to do it that way. So gut feeling. I'm a great believer in intuition. I'm a great believer in intuition being critical thinking, which is, what are the other ways we could do this? How might we approach this differently? And I have it in my head. I've got virtual advisors. I look at some people that I really admire in business, and often I'll ask the question, how would Richard Branson do that in his really different way? How would Royston Guest do that? How would Elon Musk do it? How would Steve Jobs have done it? And just by asking myself that question, I try and get inside their head and their thought processes. So intuition, I think, is still around critical thinking. Sometimes gut feel is not quite intuition. It can be more autopilot. That's how I'd probably separate the two.
Yeah.
Just one little bit on it is I tend to carry some frameworks around with me just to help start off my critical thinking. So, for example, if I'm doing business planning, I carry the framework of PESTLE with me. And that stands for politically what's going on in the world, economically what's going on in the world, socially what's going on in the world, technologically what is going on that can help me, legally where do I stand, and what will the impact of my decision be on the environment. Just having that framework and those 6 headings starts me and the team going down that critical thinking route. So intuition might start me on the journey, but I think there's other people with equally good thinking processes that can help me. So I'm likely to ask them what they think as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I had a conversation with a client about this the other day about gut feel, and I think you said something earlier that really differentiates the difference between gut feel and intuition. So gut feel for me is very much based on emotion. It's unsubstantiated, and it can be that you are snapshot in the moment decision. Whereas you said something earlier about you've got to sometimes give yourself space to be able to do the critical thinking. And I think intuition is based more on you've worked through the upsides, the downsides. You've looked at everything from a 360 perspective. You've brainstormed with your team. You've got advice from other people who've trodden the pathway, been there and done it. And you put all that lot together in the decision-making mixer, and then you go, right, the decision is going to be this. But that does lead me on to, you can. I'm absolutely believer that you engage with teams and everything else. But is there something about within critical thinking that you still got to be a decisive leader? Because at the end of the day, you still got to make a decision.
Yeah, and you might not always have the evidence. And that's where intuition kicks in, isn't it? So ideally, wouldn't it be great if everybody mapped out every single process and you were guaranteed success? There's a great phrase I hear a lot of the time that says, the best plans tend to disintegrate in the first point of contact. So you can plan all you want. Planning isn't critical thinking, and critical thinking isn't planning. It's about, how do I think differently? How do I look at a wider range of options? How do I look at the people around me? But even after all of that, you still can't be guaranteed success. So as a leader, you have to say, look, I can't guarantee success, but my intuition tells me after exploring, after speaking to people, we're going to go for it. And Colin Powell's got a great quote, and I'd recommend anybody just Google Colin Powell's 18 Lessons of Leadership, because the 18 lessons that were written many, many years ago, and they're still really relevant. And one is the P40 to 70 equation. If you've got between 40 and 70% of the information, you might just want to go with it. Because if you wait for the 70 to 100, the moment will have passed, the competitive advantage will have gone, the excitement, and you can lose loads of times and motivation in planning the 70 to the 100. I know lots of people that have got within the 40 and 70, gone with the intuition of going with it, and fixed the bits as they went along, not wait for perfection.
And Chris, that is such an important point in this, because I passionately believe you can overthink stuff. And Santander had a similar principle to you that has always stuck with me, that they talk about the 80-20. They go, when we're 80% there, when we've done the 80% of the planning, when we've done 80% of the thinking, when we've got 80% of the evidence, we go, because that last 20%, you're always going to be learning in flight anyway. So why not just press the button and go? Or the opportunity's gone, like you say. So I'm fully behind that. I think it's such an important principle. Chris, just one point that when you think about where we are today in the climate that we're in, and your experience of the work that you've done with clients, and this links back to the conversation that we had at the start of this year in terms of preparing for today, do you think leaders generally are on the front foot or behind where they need to be generally with their critical thinking skills? I know that's a big question to ask, but generally, what's your intuition tell you?
Most of the leaders I speak to and work with are busy on autopilot. And how do you create that capacity for critical thinking? It is about delegation. Often, leaders still feel that they have to do all the doing. And leaders, for me, should be working on the business, not just in the business. And on the business is thinking, what next? If I look at most leaders and they wake up and it's Monday when we're doing this call, they look at this weekend results. They were probably created months ago. Whereas what a great leader will be doing is looking at the results that they want in 6, 12, 18, 24 months and actually creating the environment and building the plan and executing the early stages of the plan to get where you need to be in 24, 36 months. Yeah. And for me, that's where I work most with leaders, because they get dragged into the weeds. That's a phrase I heard the other day. I keep getting dragged into the weeds. And I said, well, you're allowing people to do that. And one of the questions I asked to just demonstrate that we're all capable of the most immense personal growth journey and the most immense critical thinking in its its completeness of people around you as well as your own neck-top computer. I asked this question. Just remember your first ever day at work. You might have been 15, 16, 18, 21, 22, 27 if you've done a doctorate. That first day at work. Imagine if somebody gave you on that first day your in-tray that you've got today. How would you cope with it then? And the answer is, You've been all over the place.
Yeah.
The news is we do have this ability to grow and to change from doing to thinking. Because why did we get where we are today as a leader? It's probably because we had a good work ethic. We were curious about learning opportunities. We probably watched less of the equivalent of Love Island and did more reading of Build to Grow or Rise by Royston Guest or Chimp Paradox by Steve Peters. And as a result of that, we then started to learn new skills. And critical thinking is a learned skill. It's about create the capacity, then build your capability. So I think there's lots of opportunity, but often we just get on this. I've heard people use the phrase hamster wheel or dragged into the weeds. Critical thinking starts with you. Critical thinking starts with creating the capacity in your diary to say, I'm going to think about what I want the future to look like, whether that's for me personally or me professionally or the business or the team that I lead. It starts with critical thinking. Everything does.
Chris, there's a really key point that I think we could nail for our listeners today. And it builds exactly on what you're talking about there. What's your view? Because I come across this a lot, that a lot of the leaders that I work with are really action-orientated individuals. They're go-getters. They're used to making shit happen. And if they're not with clients or they're not with the team or they're not physically doing something, they feel like they're almost cheating the system. So I hear leaders talk to me a lot about, Royston, if I'm thinking, I feel guilty because I'm thinking. I feel like I'm not really working in inverted commas. How do we help? So question one, do you come across that? And is that part of the challenge, that how do we give leaders the permission, or how do they better give themselves the permission where they're happy to talk to their teams about, if they're spending an afternoon doing critical thinking, that actually that's really valuable and that's what their business and their teams need them to be doing?
I go back to it's everything we've ever done starts with a thought, right? What's your thoughts? Because they become your words. So your thinking is your communication. So do you want your communication to be good? Do you want people to understand your communication? Do you want people to take action on your communication? Do you want that action to be effective action that actually creates great outcomes, that actually creates the destiny of the individual or the organisation? If the answer is you want your people to be the very best they can be and who they are, and be successful, then you've got to allow them to think, what does that mean?
Yeah.
And guess what? You can't keep cramming work in your head and expect the thinking to happen. That's why Sperry and Ornstein, when they understood that the fact that the brain's got two hemispheres, really did the research that says when your left brain's in action, you're logical, analytical, your right brain doesn't work. So you have to learn how to access your right brain. That's critical thinking. And the best inventions in the world were as a result of critical thinking. So for me, if I was doing a profile of a leader and all they ever said is, look what I do, I'd sit there and say, well, you're not a leader, you're a manager. Yeah. Leaders think, managers do. So move into leadership. And it is absolutely okay to think about how can we be better, who we are and what we do. How can we be a better team? How can our culture be better? How can I be a better leader? How can I care more? Well, it starts with thinking, and it's critical thinking, not autopilot. Not repeat.
So do you think there's something in there about, because it leads on to this question nicely about how can leaders cultivate a culture of critical thinking in their organization? Because it's not just down for the leaders to do it, but does that start with the leader having conversations with their people that says, for example, in 2025, 20% of my week as a minimum is going to be spent. If you look in my diary and you see a slot in my diary blocked out thinking time, you know what I'm doing. And let's be really clear about why it's so important and what value that adds for the business. Is there something about actually being proud about having a meeting in the diary with self or with the team going thinking time?
If you look at my diary, my appointment with myself is known as gold time. If people think gold is one of the most precious commodities on the planet. And whenever there's a currency run, guess what people do? They go out and buy gold, right? So it's one of the world's most precious commodities. I call it gold time. And you can look at my diary and it is full of gold time.
Yeah.
And we talk about golden nuggets. We talk about gold standards. Guess what? How do you get golden nuggets? How do you get gold standards? You have gold time. So it's absolutely, and let's really think about this. I did a poll the other day on a program with over 200 people on it. And I'm a great believer in doing SWOT and PESTLE as business planning tools. And this is January when we did the poll. So a lot of people have just finished a calendar year. A lot of people have just finished a financial year. And I asked the question, when was the last time you and your company, your leadership team, did a SWOT or a PESTLE? 0 to 3 months, 4 to 6, 7 to 12, or 12 months plus or never. 46% of those people on that call had not done a PESTLE or a SWOT for either over 12 months or never.
Wow.
When you're thinking time, so I'm going to look at a leader and say, not only should you have goal time in every week, you should look at your team's diary and make sure they've got some goal time. Businesses that I work with will have already got their strategic critical thinking away days booked in the diary for at least 3 of them this year.
Yeah.
And it also involves some relaxation where our right brains will work, right? We'll go for walks in fresh air. That's a stimulus for getting your right brain working, right? We'll sit and talk to people that we've not talked to before around a breakfast table or a lunch table. And actually we'll go, there's some topics. Let's discuss. How can we think differently? So not just goal time weekly. What about the longer term environments you can create as a leader to actually create that critical thinking moment?
Love it. Love it. So key action for those that are listening, look at your high performance week, really think about how much of your week you've got, as Chris calls it, gold time, balcony time, thinking time, whichever it is. And quite rightly, have you got your quarterly strategy sessions laid out with your team? That is your opportunity to get to the balcony of the business, get offside. They are part of your critical thinking. If you do not map your high performance weeks, high performance months, high performance quarters to include thinking time, guess what? It won't happen because you'll be so busy on the dance floor of your business that time will fly by and you'll miss the opportunity to do that critical thinking. So I think that's a really practical action that people can take, Chris.
Of course it is. And again, let's replace strategy days with critical thinking days, because your strategy will be part of your critical thinking.
Nice. And retagging it up and just thinking about it in that context. And how do you get the whole organization where there is this culture of people create time to think, that they absolutely can block stuff in their diary and they don't feel guilty, or more importantly, Chris, that they don't feel like they're going to get called out by their manager or leader because somebody sees in their diary a slot that says 2 hours of thinking time?
I think one of the things leaders can do, right, to enable us to give them creative time is ask for an idea a month. Ask everybody in your business, can you give me one idea a month to make our business better? Better for the business, better for the customers, might be better for the community, better for yourself. Just one idea. And often the best people that can change a process are the people who are closest to the process. And that isn't the chief exec, right? I was a managing director of a bank. I never served customers on the counter, but I was responsible for the service that every customer got from everybody on the counter. So I still had absolute responsibility. But the best people who could say we could change this process, do that differently, were the people who serve customers. So I always asked them to have some time, and we had something in our bank called deferred opening, and that was 30 minutes. And we opened later on one day in the week. And what we used a lot of those 30 minutes for was to come up with new ideas. That was our critical thinking time.
Yeah, nice. So, Chris, question, and I think I know what your answer to this is going to be, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Is critical thinking a muscle memory, a skill that can be learned?
It is, absolutely. And again, I'll refer people back. Go read Dr. Steve Peters' Chimp Paradox. Unbelievably wonderful book. And what's brilliant about that book is at the end of every chapter, there's some actions for you to take. There's some exercises to do. So, there's that. I've looked at, mentioned Jack Black and his company Mindstore. Jack's got a great YouTube channel. Of course, it's a learned skill. I was born 60 years ago, and I wasn't born with a strategic thinking brain or a critical thinking brain, right? It's a learned skill. It's a case of, number one, do I value it or will I value it? Number two, will I value it enough that I actually want to create that as part of my model week? The best performers, either in business or sport, tend to have real good structure and discipline and know what is really, really important in terms of performance outputs. And it starts with your thinking. I go back to what's your thoughts, so they become your words. What's your words, because they become your actions. What's your actions, because they become your habits. What's your habits, because they become your character. What's your character, for it becomes your destiny. If you want a great outcome, a great destiny, it starts with what's your thoughts. Create the thoughts that make the destiny that you want.
So, two things. One, hopefully what today's podcast is doing for our listeners is raising their conscious awareness about the importance of critical thinking, particularly in that leadership role, albeit right across the whole of your business. Every single person needs to develop the skill. Number two, you've got to create the environment for you to be able to do quality critical thinking, which is physically blocking out time in your diary. It can be part of what you do every single day, but if you, in the early stages, block out physical slots in your diary that will create the space for you to be able to do the critical thinking. Chris, let's then talk about the toolkit. So you've talked a lot about a couple of things. One, don't just make sure you've got the right people around you who, in terms of teams, externally from your business, people who've trodden the pathway, apply that principle of success modeling. That's one key within your toolkit. Just a question on that. What's your view in terms of cognitive diversity? Because I see a lot of leaders who recruit clones, who recruit yes people, and that's not going to play out. If you want critical thinking, you can't just have people around you who are going to agree with you. You need cognitive diversity. So I'm intrigued in your take on that, in the people that you put around you and in the people you have as your inner circle of trusted confidence. How important is the cognitive diversity within that?
Oh, unbelievable. It has to be. Well, I'm 6 years of age. I can't think like an 18-year-old. And I meet a lot of leaders who think they can think like anybody. They can't. If I want to know what an 18-year-old's life looks like and feels like at the moment, I can't think it. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to ask some 18-year-olds, what's going on in your world at the moment? What does my business need to think of? And I look at the environment, for example. I look at sort of people between the ages of 10 and maybe 30 at the moment. They make buying decisions on an organization's environmental strategy.
Yeah.
So if I don't go and ask those people what are they thinking, not what do I think, then I'd never know, and I might make some poor decisions.
Yeah.
So for me, it's really important. And my favourite story about critical thinking is you often see on the news examples of where a bus has not been able to fit under a bridge and gets stuck. It happens quite a lot. And there's a great story of this bus gets stuck under a bridge, and all the top engineers come out and they go, how are we going to move this bus? And they're thinking about cranes, they're thinking about all different sorts of operations. And there's a 6-year-old with his dad watching this unfold. And he hears people going, this is going to be really tricky, it's going to be really difficult, I don't know how we're going to do it. And the 6-year-old says, have you ever thought of letting the tyres down?
Brilliant.
sometimes what you need to do, right, is ask that range of people, that cognitive diversity. And what do you think, I believe, is one of the best questions a leader can ask? And let's remember what I said earlier. The best leaders ask multiple questions. They don't make multiple statements. Instead of giving people a good talking to, they give people a great listening to. As a result of that, what that does is almost crowdsource critical thinking. So ask lots of questions, ask lots of people, and then actively listen. And fully enough, even as a leader of a big PLC or big organizations, you might just learn something. You might then be able to do it differently. And as a result of that, be a better leader.
Love it. Love it. So surround yourself with the right people with that cognitive diversity, success modeling we've talked about. Questioning skills are absolutely a activator for really creating critical thinking and doing your fact finding together with the listening skills. What else did we talk about on there? Operating in a state of curiosity, which is that growth mindset, isn't it? We always talk about the importance of your growth mindset. Never stop learning.
But look, and again, if we look at our lives, perhaps as a parent, us or an auntie or an uncle, children ask why. Children are great at asking questions, and as a result of that, it stimulates thinking. So look, get the right people, ask the right questions, listen, create the capacity for you to start the journey for yourself and engage in others by giving yourself the capacity to build that capability of critical thinking, use some simple tools and techniques, go on a lifelong journey of asking questions. And funnily enough, critical thinking then becomes the way you do things. And Steve Peters' book talks about the more you use a pathway in your head, the wider it becomes. Therefore, the faster the information processes. And as a result of that, you get then to do things better. And that gives you the capacity to carry on asking more questions. All about what do you think? How would you do it better? How could we do it better? What next? Why? So all of the open questions, I think, are great from a leadership perspective.
Yeah. Chris, I've got one final area I just want to explore with you, because when we were prepping for today, you shared a great example of your 3 circles model. And I think part of it is about understanding the relationship between the past, the present, and the future. So will you share your 3 circles model, as you called it?
Yeah, look, it's not mine. It's not original. I've learned it somewhere, but I think it's really powerful, so I share it wherever I can. The 3 circles are the circle of anxiety or concern, the circle of influence, and the circle of control. And I know lots of people that spend too much time in the circle of concern or the circle of anxiety. And that can often disable or paralyze your thinking, because you're just going, it's terrible, it'll never end, it's not fair. Actually, if you spend more time in circle of control or circle of influence, actually they're the action boxes. And so if you move out of the area of concern and anxiety, what your critical thinking might say is, what can I do about it? And who can help me? And by asking those 2 questions, what can I do and who can help me? You start to operate in the circle of control, because you're in complete control of your action, and circle of influence that says, who can help me? Who can influence me? Who can influence others? So if I look at UK government at the moment, I know a lot of people spend a lot of time being concerned about their decision making. But actually, you could go and speak to your local council or your local MP and influence them by letting them know what decisions they make are having on your life. Or you could actually sit down with other people and say, I can't change that decision, but what do I do to understand the decision in my day-to-day life? And actually, what actions can I take? So I really, really encourage people that once they recognize they're in the circle of concern or anxiety, not to stay there, to actually move into who can help me and what can I do for myself? And that's the circle of control and the circle of influence. So again, I just use that as a bit of a guide to see where we spend our time, because anxiety concern is not taking action. And I'm a great believer that action is what is needed.
And I just love that model, Chris. I love the simplicity of it, because I talk a lot about your relationship with the past, the present, and the future. And most of the concern or anxiety that we have as human beings is either centered on what's happened in the past or overthinking the future. Whereas what you're talking about in terms of the control and the influence of the trigger questions that go in there is about making sure that you live in the present. The bit that you can influence, the bit you can control, and control the controllable, as I always say, is the present. There's a reason why it's called the present, because it's a gift. And if you spend your life looking in the rearview mirror or living in the past, and if you're driving forward in life looking in the rearview mirror, the one thing for certain is you're going to crash. And if you overthink the future, you create anxiety or burn mental calories that you just don't need to burn. And what I like about that 3 circles model, as you call it, is it forces you to really focus on control the controllable, be a master of your own destiny, and seek those around you who can really influence and support you on your journey and help you with that critical thinking.
Yeah, and look, that's why I share it. It's just really, really simple for me. And I'll just share a last story. I worked with somebody who was looking to seek some investment for their company. And I sat down and explained that as the founder, as the owner of that business, they're going to have to fund some of the investment presentations. This person said, I can't possibly stand up in front of people. I says, why not? And this person was in their 50s. And they says, I just don't like presenting. And when we explored why, it's because 35 years ago at an event at school, a teacher had humiliated this individual about their presentation skills. And for the last 35 years, that person had spent time in the circle of anxiety and concern about presenting in public. The person who did it had passed away over 27 years ago. So somebody who's been dead for 27 years is still having an impact on somebody. Well, that person spent all their time in the anxiety and concern. When we started talking about the circle of influence and the circle of control, because presenting, I get that not everybody feels comfortable with presenting, but just like critical thinking, presenting is a learned skill as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, we say, well, who can help and what can you control? And actually, we worked on the script, we worked on how to segment presentations into small topics. So actually, an hour's presentation is an introduction and an end. That's 10 minutes. And then you've got 50 minutes left. It's 3 topics of 15 minutes with 5 minutes to cover anything else. And I asked the question, do you know what you're talking about for 15 minutes about your business and what it can do to make a difference to people's lives? You went, oh, yeah, of course I can. Well, let's just agree the 3 topics and off you go. You'll just talk about it. And that was the role, right?
What a great example. Great example, Chris. And there's so many other examples of that, which is why I wanted you to share that model, because I just think it's... So in your toolkit as well, there are lots of models and tools and out there that will help you with your critical thinking. So if we come to the end, Chris, I think if we summarize, number one, I think we've done a really compelling job of understanding why critical thinking is so important. How do you get yourself in the right mindset where you don't feel guilty and you are enabling your critical thinking, blocking it out in your diary? And there's a whole series of tools that hopefully will stimulate the listener to think about what they've got in their armory and in their toolkit that they'll be able to use to kind of really accelerate their journey in developing that critical thinking muscle, which is so fundamental as a leader. Is there any final point that you'd want to share, Chris, to end on this, great subject?
I talk about the 3 C's, and this was given to me in the year 2000 by a former boss called Mike Hutchins. He says, Chris, if you're looking to do something different, create capacity so you can give it some thinking time. When you're creating the capacity, look on how you can build your capability in that area. That's the learned skill bit. He said, and the 3rd C is then go out day in, day out and practice that new skill and get feedback from others. He says, and what building capacity and creating capability does is give you confidence. And that's the third C. And at the moment, there might be listeners that haven't got the confidence to have a chat with their boss, perhaps about critical thinking time in the diary or critical thinking team days, half days. But ultimately, first of all, create the capacity. You lead yourself. As a result of that, people see a better you. As a result of that, they'll ask you why, what you've been doing. Well, I've been creating capacity for critical thinking. That means I've got better decision-making capability and I'm more engaging with my team. As a result of that, we're getting outputs. As a result of that, everybody's more confident. So I always talk about the 3 Cs: capacity, capability, confidence.
What a great place to end. Mr. Brindley, if people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place? Is that through LinkedIn?
Yeah, lad, I only do LinkedIn as social media. If people can just do me one thing, that's all I ask when they connect on LinkedIn. Just let me know that they've seen me on this podcast. I get lots of requests from people who don't even have the courtesy to put an invite. All I ask is, more than happy to connect, but I just want people from the podcast to connect so I can help them understand any questions they might have. But all I'd ask is, can you just say, heard you on Royston's podcast, do you mind if we connect?
Love it. Thank you so much for coming on today, Chris. I just know people are going to have got so many golden nuggets from today. That's episode 11 of The Life of a Business Leader. If you like it, make sure you share it. The more people we can get exposed to the life of a business leader, the more better leaders that we will grow and develop, and therefore we will build better businesses that fuels the economy. So for me, the host of The Life of a Business Leader, until next time, a big thank you to Chris Brindley, and bye for now.
Bye. Cheers, everyone.